Scenes of calm on the streets of Moscow on Sunday, where just a day earlier the government threw up military checkpoints amid reports that an armed column of mutinous Russian mercenaries were barreling north toward the capital. A tumultuous 2 days saw Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of the Wagner private militia, seize the southern Russian city of Rostov-on-Don and challenge the authority of President Vladimir Putin. But a short while later, a deal was brokered that saw the mercenaries stand down, with Prigozhin to leave Russia for neighboring Belarus. The unrest whipsawed Moscow residents. A man who gave his name as Andrei told Reuters, quote, "It was really uneasy yesterday. But look, it's Sunday, people are walking in the streets. It's all good. Let's hope it's all going to be peaceful in the city, in the country, and in the world too. Let's hope it will all be peacefully resolved." But in Rostov-on-Don, where Wagner tank treads scored the city's pavement, locals were still shaken. A resident who gave his name as Dmitry said simply, "There are very serious problems in the country and they need to be solved. People who can no longer tolerate it, they resort to such radical methods as Prigozhin." Prigozhin and his Wagner fighters were once hailed by Russian media as heroes of the invasion of Ukraine. But Prigozhin has been fiercely criticizing Russia's military leadership for months. On Friday, he claimed his forces were attacked by the regular army, prompting his apparent mutiny. The short-lived upheaval has raised questions over Putin's hold on power.
It's the most dramatic military political confrontation in Russia in the last 30 years, since the time of the collapse of the Soviet Union in the early 1990s.
Brian Taylor is a professor at Syracuse University.
I think Putin emerges from this significantly weakened. I think if you're a member of the Russian elite, or in fact a member of the Russian population, you're going to look at this and think, wow, a private army just drove on Moscow for most of the day. No one stopped them, and they're allowed to leave, and no real consequences after the president went on TV and called what they were doing treason and made comparisons to 1917.
U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken on Sunday said the Wagner mutiny showed cracks in the Russian president's hold on power, telling ABC News, quote, "I don't think we've seen the final act." And there's also the question about how this might impact Russian operations in Ukraine, just as Kiev is in the midst of a counteroffensive. The Ukrainian military on Sunday released footage of what it said were its forces storming Russian trenches near the city of Bakhmut. A brigade commander claimed on Telegram the video showed a Russian bridgehead on a riverbank had been completely cleared. Russia's defense ministry said it had repelled attacks, including 10 in the Bakhmut area.
I think this is clearly, we see cracks emerging. Where they go, if anywhere, when they get there, very hard to say. I don't want to speculate on it, but I don't think we've seen the final act. This has been a devastating strategic failure for Putin across virtually every front, economic, military, geopolitical standing. There is absolute unity, both of purpose and in action, in terms of supporting the Ukraine, making sure they have what they need to defend themselves. And that's where our focus is. That's where the president's focus has been. There are lots of unanswered questions, including the questions of what happens to Prigozhin's forces. Do they remain in Ukraine? I mean, we saw the extraordinary image of these forces coming out of Ukraine and going into Russia just yesterday. And there's been a lot of focus on making sure that the Ukrainians have what they need to be as successful as possible on the ground. And we'll see how that unfolds over the coming weeks and even coming months. But again, to the extent this presents a distraction, a loss of focus for the Russians, that may help the Ukrainians on the battlefield. And this really is fundamentally an internal matter for the Russians. We're seeing it unfold. Again, we saw the rising tensions over several months that led to this. But exactly where this goes, we don't know. But what we do know is that we've seen real cracks emerge. Again, a direct challenge to Putin's authority.